to us, there's part of our intake meeting with the manager when we're in a role that's particularly specialist is about finding that hook. What is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? Why do you work here, right? As the person who's going to manage this role, what can we draw from that? What's the opportunities in there? Is there ability to build a personal brand within the business?
Welcome to the All in Recruitment podcast by Manatal, where we explore best practices, learnings, and trends with leaders in the recruitment space. If you like our content, please subscribe to our channels on YouTube and Spotify to stay tuned for our weekly episodes. I'm your host, Lydia, and joining us today is Zoe Watling from Informa. Welcome, Zoe, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Lydia.
So, Zoe, what's your journey been like in the talent space? What is your growth story?
Yeah, so I started off about 13 years ago working really simply for a cleaning and security company where I did everything from their recruitment to a bit of HR and payroll. And from there, I spent quite a few years in agency side. So I spent 5 or 6 years in agency side and got a great opportunity to recruit across quite a few different areas. I started off in technology for a good few years, which gives you some super solid foundations, teaches you how to headhunt quite effectively because you have to, and generate a bit of a network there. And then I moved over to some other areas, comms, marketing. And then 4 years ago, I moved in-house within Informa. So we're a publicly listed business in the UK, but we're a global business and a very complex one. So since I've been there, I think my career's accelerated somewhat, which is a great opportunity at somewhere like Informa because there is so much to learn and so much complexity. And actually, as soon as you get stuck in, you find that there's loads of opportunities to go. So started off there as a talent partner, moved up to run the team out of EMEA, and then more recently, in the last couple of years, I've been the head of talent acquisition for one of our divisions in Informa Tech. So it's really been a bit of a acceleration since I've moved into Informa. But I think one of the key things is the talent acquisition space has been evolving as well. So it's been a really great time to be part of the sector, and has led to a lot of opportunities where I am, which is always good.
Your experience in the agency side and also the early days of starting up and starting in a role that required you to probably wear many hats. How much of that have you taken into a role like this kind of acceleration in your career?
Yeah, a lot of it actually. I think there's a lot to say for having a bit of a broader role starting out. I think it's a great way to figure out what you want to do, and which part of the roles you actually enjoy. But also, I think that role in particular taught a lot of persistence, taught a lot of resilience. And then going into agency side, I think you really have to start to navigate how to grow quite autonomously, how to find opportunities and really master communication skills, which I think is really important. Also teach you a lot about pace of working, and how much you can achieve in a day, which I think has really set me up. So we always tend to look for talent acquisition partners who have done a bit of a stint in agency, because we do believe there's some really great foundational skills you learn there, and great techniques, and it gives us a really good foundation to build on for in-house. So we're quite an advocate for that. I know that some talent teams are slightly more skeptical, but I think we're all about the attitudes and behaviors and then the skills you can teach, right? So I think a lot of it's shaped me quite well in how I can manage my workload. And I think if I'd just come directly in-house, I wouldn't have necessarily had those different opportunities or those different challenges, to be honest.
And over the past 4 years, you've clearly accelerated, gone from one role to the next, leading teams, and now partnering with the tech side of things, right? So what are some areas, or if you've had the opportunity to look into prioritizing any areas this year for talent acquisition, especially for tech?
Yeah, so we've done a couple of things this year. One of which has been really around metrics and KPIs for our team. So there's one thing, being able to communicate to the business that they're happy with the team, and often in TA, happiness is silence, right? If you're not hearing any noise, the team must be doing okay. But we really believed we had a really high performing team, and we wanted to be able to talk to the business about it in quantifiable terms. So we've done a lot more measuring and metrics, and we're very fortunate that we've got the setup and live Power BI dashboards so that the business can also look in to see what we're doing at any time. And the other aspect of it has been really building that partnership between all of our talent partners and the business. And by partnership, I mean the balance in that relationship. I think historically TA teams have always had a bit of a master servant dynamic with the business, in the fact that we're a service provider, so we need to do as we're told. And what we've really been trying to shape is how we can really effectively partner the business so that we're advising, we're consulting, and we're adding value back. And in return for that, we're asking for things to shift and change in the business to make the recruitment more effective, to make it more inclusive, to put a bit of effort back from the business side as well, which has been quite transformative. It's been tough. It definitely hasn't
Yeah,
been
yeah,
easy, and I think it's
no
a
doubt
bit
about
of a
that.
shift that areas of the business are really keen for, and other areas of the business would rather not be challenged on anything and just sort of do as you're told. But it's been a really interesting time for us to level up what we're doing in talent acquisition.
So, what's the approach like for talent acquisition this year, or rather, just across the business for Informa? I understand there's a push towards hiring specialists, right, over generalists.
Yeah, so we're fortunate enough to have a larger team across Informa, and we're globally positioned as well. And one of those things has meant we can really specialize our team into specialist areas, as opposed to matching people with stakeholders to work with over and over again. So we've split our teams into sales specialists, marketing specialists, technology specialists, content specialists, and corporate services specialists, to one, allow the team to have that deep dive knowledge of those areas that are niche skill sets, that are a bit deeper, that are harder to fill roles, and be able to generate a network and a pipeline, so that we can be more effective for the business. Because one of Informa's taglines is championing the specialist. And that means that we have a lot of unique jobs within the business. We have a lot of unique skill sets within the business, and being able to allow our team to specialize and focus in on those areas so that we got that depth of understanding a bit quicker, we can reduce that time to offer and time to hire on those roles, has been really imperative for our continued success and growth, especially our credibility within the business. And also just making sure that our team are being upskilled to be able to deal with that, that they're spending more time with key people in the business to learn from, that they're networking and talking with more specialists in the business to try to find what that secret sauce is, or read between the lines a little bit of job descriptions to get those hooks to attract the right talent.
So, what sort of strategies or techniques have you found to be effective when it comes to attracting or even identifying top specialist talents in competitive markets, especially?
I think the ability to attract is still a work in process, really. And part of that is because we do so many different specialist areas. We don't physically have the funding within our brand project to go after each of those individually. So a lot of the energy into attracting specialists actually having to come from the team's ability to proactively source and headhunt, and making sure that we're utilizing our hiring managers in the business to help us cultivate that message to go out to someone to be worth clicking on. Because as I'm sure most of the world is at the moment, inundated with people tapping them on the shoulder asking if they are interested in a job move. So it's really about utilizing our business to fill that gap that we're not ever going to be able to really truly get to the bottom of, but really help cultivate that. We've also found in some areas and some regions it's been really effective actually utilizing our managers to do that reach out. and to connect with someone who's industry known and utilize sort of the personalities and the identities we have in the business to be able to do that, which will ultimately feed into our external attraction and marketing programs, but they're never a quick fix. It's never something that happens overnight. So it's really how we're balancing the both the organic and inorganic marketing methods to try to get some success in those areas.
So, in that regard, what are some of the key qualities or maybe skills that would differentiate specialists from generalists?
I think if I think in particular about our research business is a great example of somewhere where actually the level of specificity of knowledge within those roles is really quite niche. Some of our more senior research roles, there might be, 10, 20 qualified people globally who are able to do that job. And often it comes down to a mixture of the deep dive knowledge and sector specific areas, but also it comes down to the renown within the industry. Like, is that person a voice that people are going to want to buy research off? So often it comes down to really, it sounds quite simplistic things, but ultimately it really narrows the pool for us. So there's a big amount of that really specific niche knowledge.
And when it comes to crafting job descriptions, or if you go out and advertise this role or this vacancy, how do you go about? What might be some tips to craft specialists or job descriptions that would attract specialists and those who are extremely knowledgeable in their field? What kind of language do you use? What is the tone, and what type of terminology, if any, do you need to use in there?
It's a really great question. I think ultimately there's a standardization to job descriptions happening across businesses at the moment, where to get great career paths in the business, you want competency frameworks, you want things in place that almost neutralize those job descriptions in some ways when we're talking about attracting specialists. To us, there's part of our intake meeting with the manager when we're in a role that's particularly specialist is about finding that hook. What is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? Why do you work here, right? As the person who's going to manage this role, what can we draw from that? What's the opportunities in there? Is there ability to build a personal brand within the business? What are those little pieces that we can offer that are unique in quite a lot of ways, but there will be other businesses doing it, but that's going to change you from reading the first line and being like, okay, it's another senior analyst position too. Oh, that's the one I really want to go for. So it's really utilizing the brains of our hiring managers and, what gets them up in the morning and personalizing it. I think we're definitely moved into a space in the last 2 years, more so than I've seen it before, where it needs to be a bit more human going out. Everything that we're doing in terms of candidate sentiment analysis, a lot of that is around how people are feeling about businesses, how people feel about a role they're doing. It's less so that almost hygiene factors are evolving. So it's really finding out how we can identify that. There's an element of inclusion and diversity that comes into that as well. I think there's a lot more importance for people feeling that they can bring themselves to work, feeling like their different viewpoints are going to be considered, different thoughts are going to be allowed in the room. And it's really hard to try to captivate that in a job description, really bring a company culture into a paragraph, because that's really all the time you have to convince someone. So for that element of it, we've done a lot of work in our sort of equal opportunity statements that go at the bottom of our job descriptions to just try to humanize a little bit. So I don't think there's one way to do it, but I think the big tips is the biggest specialists in your business are the people you're recruiting for. And if you're not utilizing their specialism, and if you're not utilizing their reasons for coming to work in the morning, then you're missing a trick.
Plenty of recruiters or people in the talent business themselves who have started to see the benefits of automating the writing of this job description, right? You've got ChatGPT and you've got all the other tools that have arisen from it in the past 6 to 10 months, right? We're seeing all these things coming out. So what might be the impact of tools such as ChatGPT and other such AI or generative technologies on on creating job descriptions that would fit specialists?
I think if I take that in two parts, actually, because I think it's a really important conversation to talk about generative AI and its role in the TA space, because I think fundamentally we're getting to a point that if you're not using generative AI to drive efficiencies in your work, you will be outperformed by people who are. So I definitely think we're getting to that level and stage in terms of we need to lean in and adopt. Historically, HR specialists, talent specialists have always been seen as later adopters of these things. I think actually we need to get on the train early this time, because the efficiencies it can drive for us in our outreach, in helping us tailor language to specific audiences, the more it's being used, the more it's learning and the better it's getting. So there's 100% a space for generative AI within TA. My caution with it is it shouldn't be used to make decisions about people. It should be used to help attract. It should be used to help us curate better language. I don't know many talent acquisition partners who are natural marketeers. I don't think it's generally something that comes together. So using those tools to really give yourself an edge and getting that language right is really important. But we've got to be careful about the inherent bias in AI, because of the fact that a lot of what's out there is inherently quite biased in decision making. When it comes to writing job descriptions and writing hooks and writing approaches, it's never something you're going to be able to copy and paste. I think you need to bring your voice and your tone and your personality to those messages. But if you're like me and you're completely paralyzed by a blank page and you don't know where to start, it's a great tool to just get that kick started and get that going. And also when you're working with a manager to try to come up with that hook, sharing your screen with something like ChatGPT on, or whichever tool you use, and playing with the language a little bit to see what comes out. I definitely think it's a tool that we should be using and adopting, but we should just be using it for copy, for writing. We shouldn't be using it for helping us simplify and decide between CVs or anything like that.
Moving on to the different kinds of work arrangements that we're seeing, right? Especially, I mean, it's not new. Gig economy and remote work is obviously not new. It's just accelerated in the past 2 or 3 years, as we've seen, right? It's a crucial period in which we're seeing more and more companies starting to adopt remote work, fully remote and fully decentralized, even if you want to call it, right? So we're seeing the gig economy, we're seeing remote work, and these have all become so prevalent. So how has this influenced your approach to hiring specialists? Does this have any impact at all?
So definitely more so in the technology space. I think what we've seen for the last 2 years, Informa's always been quite a flexible working business. We've always had quite a population of remote workers globally. It's not something that's completely new to us. I think the scale of what's changed and the shift is quite new, and how truly hybrid we are, even for our near our office hubs, is definitely new. It does open doors, absolutely. Technology talent in particular, people being able to work from more remote parts of countries, being with closer to family, all those sort of benefits that help with that work-life balance. My massive concern is for early careers. I think a lot of us who've grown up in office environments and had that opportunity got a lot through osmosis. We got a lot through being in the office, hearing conversations happening, sitting in on meetings, and all that sort of shadow piece. And that's my one concern about it is, are we set up robustly enough within businesses with enough robust training to help early talent that will be more remote or won't necessarily have their manager in the office every day? So I think there is a balance to have there. But yeah, we're definitely leaning into the remote working a lot more, whilst balancing the fact that we do have people who like to be office based, and we do have office hubs in every country we operate in and from, so that there is that choice for our colleagues as well. So there's value in both.
Are there any memorable success stories? Are there any success stories at all, or any particular challenges you might remember at the top of your mind? that you've encountered when, as you grow in your role, as you've grown in your role at Informa, right? Are there any memorable success stories or challenges that you may have seen while hiring or looking out for specialists for business?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's been one thing that the pandemic has really affected when it comes to the talent acquisition space is people's willingness or lack thereof for those connections that we would have had before. So I think we were very fortunate pre-pandemic in the fact that everything all worked quite a certain way. Within each region, there was always a certain way of approaching things and a certain way of doing things. And with the pandemic, that all shifted. So I think a big challenge for us as a team, and to help move and coach the business with as well, was how the dynamic shifted between employers having a little bit more power and control in the market to candidates actually having a lot more power and control in the market. Um, and I guess one of our big success stories with that is, even though we're quite a large business, we've always been quite good at staying agile and staying quite nimble on it. And one of the great things we have through the level of interaction our team have with the business is we can pull together that sort of qualitative information quite quickly to make sure that we pivot. So a great example of this is certain regions where we were really fixed on having an office hub, because we'd always had an office hub and that's always how it had worked. And then noticing the real drop off in interest or being able to engage people to come into office spaces, sort of in 21, 22, was really being able to provide the data back to the business to show the size and scale of the talent pools in that area that were working remotely, and the success stories from the businesses, and really utilizing data a lot more in the day to day. And I think it's something that TA as sort of a sector, as sort of a profession, are getting better at. But I think a lot of our success over the last couple of years with our team, and we've been recognised within the business and got an Informa award, which is a really great achievement for us, has been our utilisation of data to really influence the business. And when we're talking about specialist talent and we're talking about sparse candidate pools, being able to communicate that in a way that business can understand and that's commercially driven has been massively impactful for us.
And you talked earlier about putting a focus on metrics and KPI, right? So what might be the target around that? Do you have specific targets on these different KPIs that you have?
Yes and no. I think a lot of it will change by region and by specialism. We know that technology roles will take longer to hire. We know that some junior sales roles can be a really quick fill. So I think one of the really important things when implementing metrics into a talent team is it's not a case of putting one fixed set of metrics. I think there has to be nuance there. But if anything, what we really built our metrics based on was what the performance had been. And we know that met industry standards from obviously the articles and the pieces that we're reading and we're looking at, and just making sure we're flexible to the market conditions. I mean, a lot of people will talk to how challenging the last few years has been compared to previous in terms of talent attraction and being able to get people. So it has to be achievable. But one thing it can show to the business is this is what we think good looks like, and here's where we're measuring. And ultimately, when we're talking about gaining investment, when we're talking about the impact our team's having on the business from cost saving, being able to quantify that and show that in really powerful dashboards has completely revolutionized how we work and our credibility levels within our business.
So in terms of these dashboards and real-time metrics, as real as it can get, right? It's critical when it comes to pivoting your strategies or switching the tactics that you use out there, right? Understanding where the trends are moving and where the inward trends are going to be pointing towards, where it affects the business. So when it comes to technology aiding these kinds of decisions that you make, right? What role does technology such as data and analytics specifically play in hiring, the whole hiring process that you have in Informa?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's something that we use day in, day out now. We're really fortunate that we're a bit more mature in our utilization of it and we have the dashboards to hand. And those dashboards don't just talk about what our team are doing, they're telling us about the trend impacts in the business. Are approvals getting quicker or slower? Have processes changed and become less efficient? What's actually the retention of the hires we're making? Are we hiring the right people in the right ways? Are our processes robust enough? Are we identifying the right thing? So it's actually completely changed the game in the fact that often it's anecdotal. Every single sort of head of TA or senior TA person I speak to can tell you a million and one anecdotal stories, and being able to back that up with data, because often those anecdotal stories are pretty spot on, but being able to show the business through the data how that helps. It's also helped us inform and identify where the barriers are, where the blocks are within the process, where's the slowdown. Is that delay because our team's lacking the right tools to be able to do that job? Is it actually managers taking a vacation in the middle of a hiring process and slowing things down? What are the trends there that we can use to help drive efficiencies to make our processes more robust, but the business process more robust as well? And ultimately, we can look at the trends. We can look at our hiring trends within the business versus what the market is, especially when when there's so much data now tracking redundancies and things out of business. Are we actually planning our having our workforce planning to work really well with that? Should we be bringing forward more product roles because there have been product redundancies?
Right.
And it's really helping us be a lot more strategic and a lot more effective in the business. And it's a core tool that we use on a daily basis. And I think if a couple of years ago you'd asked me if I thought that was a possibility or something we'd be doing, I'd have probably said there's no way we can get the data that we need to get. But actually, we're very fortunate. We've got an incredible head of reporting and recruitment ops who gets it all there for us, but it massively impacts the way we make decisions and just the strength behind those decisions, I think.
And so you've talked a lot about the impact of technology and the need for metrics and being analytical, just looking at the numbers and making sure you're making as informed decisions as you should be, right, around the hiring process, etc. So in that sense, what does a talent acquisition specialist or professional need to be today? What kind of skills or what kind of attitude should they bring within this industry now?
Yeah, and I think that this is a really interesting question because I'm sure everyone's got a slightly different answer to it. Um, I think for me, and sort of where I sit on this right now, is there's got to be a lot of value back to the business from a talent acquisition partner. And when I say that, I don't just mean, filling the roles quickly and making sure that, everyone's really happy throughout that process. I'm talking a lot more about that true element of partnership, the being able to challenge the business when skill sets don't coexist. So instead of searching the role for ages and getting to that conclusion, having the strength and the credibility to be able to negotiate on that at the start, and through those conversations getting involved in workforce planning with those teams that you work really closely with, so you can help really shape that business through the talent that's available. So I think there's a lot more of a strategic and that sort of growth mindset that I think is needed now within talent acquisition that potentially wasn't before. And I think that's just our profession is evolving and actually getting more recognized and very well recognized, but it does just mean that it can become as big and broad a role as you want it to. I think data is really important. I think if you're going to a business these days and you're trying to tell them, black is blue, then you need the data to back that up. And whether that's market data, there's so much out there. Agencies all around the world publish market reports all the time about trends. There's the insights tool, the likes of, LinkedIn Insights or Horsefly or those sort of things that can really help you get good demographic data, good talent size data. But essentially, we need to become more data driven as a profession to gain that business credibility. If we talk the business's language more, the partnership's more effective. And I think that's really where the evolution needs to be now.
Thank you very much, Zoe, for your time and your insights. I mean, these have been very generous insights, which I think the audience will find very valuable. So, in case someone wants to pick up the conversation with you later, please drop us your contact details so they can connect with you.
Amazing. That's great. And the best way to get hold of me is on LinkedIn. So please feel free to sort of reach out and message on LinkedIn. And yeah, thank you very much for having me.
And we have been in conversation with Zoe Watling from Informa. Thank you for joining us, and remember to subscribe to stay tuned for more weekly episodes from All in Recruitment.